I asked ChatGPT to give me a carnivore pizza recipe, something I could make in my air fryer, ideally without having to leave the house or buy ingredients I'd never use again. I told it I had beef, cheese, and an air fryer. It responded with something called a meatza. Beef crust, cheese on top, pepperoni if I had it, no flour, no crust, no sauce. Just meat pretending to be a pizza. Sounded like something I'd try once, and then judge silently while eating all of it. So I decided to make it, and I also decided to film it. 2 angles, because I'm either serious about documenting my mistakes, or just weirdly committed to giving myself editing nightmares later. The base starts with 300 grams of minced beef. ChatGPT said that's all I need to form the crust. But I know better. Ground meat alone doesn't always behave, especially when it's going to be flattened, air-fried, and expected to hold toppings. So I made the executive decision to add 1 egg. That wasn't in the original instructions, but I've cooked with beef enough to know how quickly it can crumble if you so much as look at it wrong. The egg helps build it and gives the final product a bit more structure. Plus, it just felt right. I mixed it all in a bowl with my hands, no fork, no spoon, just full contact mixing. There's something weirdly satisfying about mushing raw beef and egg together, if you don't think too hard about it. I gave it a good mix, made sure it wasn't too wet or too dry, then moved on. Next up, cheese. ChatGPT suggested using mozzarella sticks for the stuffed crust. That's great, if you have mozzarella sticks. I didn't. What I had was a mozzarella ball. I also had about 50 grams cheese on standby that would go on top later once the base was cooked. No need to get fancy here, just plain shredded cheese. Next up, bacon. Bacon is always invited. Then came the part where I tried to be clever. ChatGPT said pepperoni, but that was a hard no. Pepperoni sounds like it has pepper in it. Instead, I reached for salami. Salami looks the part, tastes pretty close, and it's easy to work with. But then I hesitated, because I had no idea if salami was technically carnivore. So I did what any overthinking carnivore would do. I flipped it over and snapped a picture for my new nutritionist, ChatGPT. It started off strong. Pork, salt, beef collagen, that's all good. Then I hit dextrose. That's sugar. And then beet extract, which is used as a natural colorant in European products. Makes it red instead of gray. Not the worst thing in the world, but still, a plant. Meanwhile, in the US, they'd use red 40, which is less beet and more synthetic. So yeah, mine had beet juice and a little sugar. Naturally, that doesn't count as strict carnivore. If you're really going for purity, you'd leave it out. But I figured 4 slices wouldn't kill me. It's Sunday and I really crave some pizza vibes. I wasn't planning to eat the whole pack or turn this into a daily habit, so I kept it in, with the disclaimer that I do not recommend it. But today it stays. Let me know in the comments what you think about cold cuts. I chopped up 5 slices of the bacon into smaller bits. I laid them into my silicone air fryer liner because I've learned the hard way that scraping burnt fat off a non-stick tray is how you ruin both the tray and your day. I set the air fryer to 200 degrees Celsius and let the bacon go for 4 minutes. The plan was to flip it after that. Maybe give it a few more minutes at a lower temperature, depending on how it looked. While it cooked, I kept slicing. I took the salami and cut it into little triangle shapes. Not because it mattered, just because I thought it would look cool. Pizza vibes. I was fully committed to the team now. Then I returned to the mozzarella. That ball was getting turned into makeshift cheese sticks one way or another. I cut it into thick strips, roughly the size of fingers, maybe a bit thicker. I wasn't aiming for perfection. They just had to be stuffable into a meat crust. 4 minutes passed, time to check the bacon. Yeah, not great. The edges were already starting to blacken. Not burned beyond recognition, but definitely getting crispy in a way that made me nervous. This wasn't the regular strip bacon I usually use. This was the round, thinner stuff. So I turned the air fryer down to 180 degrees Celsius and gave the bacon another 4 minutes. That seemed to do the trick. It came out crispy, dark in spots, but salvageable. Would I use that bacon again? Maybe, just with lower heat from the start. At this point, the ingredients were ready, prepped and cooked, and I was still confident, somehow. Even with the slightly scorched bacon and the questionable salami, everything was moving in the right direction. Now, it was time to build the thing. The meatza. The reason I was covered in raw beef 10 minutes ago. And possibly the most ridiculous thing I've ever cooked. Which is saying something. Before I got to that though, I decided to grease the silicone pan a little. I had some leftover butter, so I smeared that around the liner with my fingers. The rest of the butter, I just ate it. Straight up. I needed to think clearly, and butter always helps. Fat sharpens the mind. At least that's what I tell myself every time I eat butter. So now, the prep was done. Meat was mixed, cheese was sliced, bacon was slightly burned but usable, and the silicone liner was buttered like a greasy little landing pad. It was finally time to build this meatza. The first instruction ChatGPT gave me was to make the beef base 1 centimeter thick. And normally, I would have just eyeballed it and moved on with life. But something in me, maybe pride, maybe boredom, decided this needed precision. So I did what any totally normal, mentally stable person would do. I stuck the end of a spoon into the meat and grabbed a tape measure. Yeah, I measured my meat crust. Now, I wasn't aiming for Michelin star accuracy here, I just wanted to be in the ballpark. Turns out, it was close enough. The spoon sank about a centimeter in, so I pressed it a bit flatter in some spots, left others alone, and called it good. At this point, the base was basically a meat pizza with no toppings. Just a big cold beef circle. I mean, the meat doesn't care what shape it is anyways. Then came the part I was least confident about. The stuffed crust. ChatGPT said to use cheese sticks, place them around the edge, and wrap the meat over to seal them in. But again, I didn't have sticks. I had these weird thick mozzarella strips that I had cut from a ball, and they were kind of floppy. Still, I placed them all around the edge, trying to create a full cheese ring. Now, sealing them in, that's where it got awkward. I still had some meat left, and by just eyeballing it, I assumed it would be enough to cover the mozzarella. But I was short by just a tiny bit. I hoped evening it out would somehow do it, but it just turned into an even more awkward experience. So I did what any desperate meat sculptor would do. I started stealing beef from the center. Just pinch little bits from the middle, press them over the cheese, smooth it with my fingers, and kept going until the mozzarella was mostly covered. Was it perfect? No. Was it functioning as a stuffed crust? Close enough. I figured if the cheese didn't explode out the sides during cooking, I would count this as a win. Once I was satisfied with my questionable beef engineering, I gave it a quick look over, smoothed the top, and took a deep breath. Time to cook. I set the air fryer to 190 degrees Celsius and placed the meatza base inside. Set the timer for 9 minutes, which ChatGPT had suggested for the initial bake. Just the crust, no toppings yet. And then I waited. Now, you wouldn't think 9 minutes is a long time. I stood there like someone waiting for their exam results. Not moving, not blinking. Around the 7-minute mark, I started smelling that beef fat aroma. At 9 minutes, I pulled it out. The top had browned just slightly and the fat had pulled around the edges. The base looked stable, not crumbly, not soggy, just moist. A little more moist than I expected, to be honest. ChatGPT had suggested draining the fat at this stage, using a paper towel. I thought about it for maybe 2 seconds. Then I decided absolutely not. That's flavor. That's macros. That's literally the point of carnivore. Keep the fat. If I wanted dry beef, I'd be eating out of a can. So I left it alone. Now it was time to load it up with toppings. I started with the bacon, which by now had cooled down just enough to be extra crispy. Sprinkled it generously all over the base. Then came the salami and the shredded cheese. About half of what I had left, just enough to get a good first melt. After that, I added more salami triangles, spacing them out in a way that said I'm trying but not that hard. At this point, the food pyramid was just a circle with fat written in every section. I placed the meatza back in the air fryer, same temperature, 190 degrees Celsius, this time for 8 more minutes. I figured that would be enough to melt everything, get a little color on the cheese, and maybe crisp up the edges a bit. And while it cooked, I just stood there again, watching, waiting, hoping that this wouldn't be the moment the mozzarella inside the crust decided to escape and flood my silicone liner. When there were 2 minutes left, I paused the cooking, opened the basket, and added one final layer of salami and cheese, because at that point, why stop? More cheese wasn't going to hurt, and the extra salami might crisp up nicely in the final stretch. Back in it went for the last 2 minutes. So now it was just a matter of pulling it out and seeing if all of this, the spoons, the measuring tape, the butter fingers, the crust reconstruction, was worth it. I pulled the meatza out of the air fryer and took a second to just stare at it. It looked ridiculous in the best possible way. It was greasy, it was dense, it was slightly monstrous. I loved it already. But I knew better than to cut it right away. ChatGPT hadn't said it, but I've cooked enough cheesy meat things to know that you have to let it rest. If you don't, the cheese slides everywhere, and the crust tears apart like wet tissue. Not ideal. So I let it sit. 10 full minutes. Finally, 10 minutes passed. Time to cut. I grabbed a knife and sliced it straight down the middle. Then across, 4 slices in total. Each one held its shape perfectly. No collapse, no sliding. The stuffed crust edges were puffed enough to show a bit of the mozzarella inside, and the base hadn't shrunk at all. It was still thick, juicy, and fully holding together. I used a spatula to pick the slices up and transfer them to a plate. First bite. Crispy bacon, gooey cheese, beefy crust. The mozzarella in the edge wasn't aggressively stretchy, but it had melted nicely and gave the outer layer some richness that made it feel like a proper stuffed crust, just made of meat. The salami, it was fine. It tasted good, no surprise there. But knowing what was in it, the dextrose, the beet extract, kind of took the edge off for me. It didn't ruin it, but I was definitely aware of it the whole time. Like inviting a cousin to dinner who talks too much. Harmless, but still kind of distracting. Would I use the salami again? Probably not. Next time I'm going to simply skip it. The bacon and cheese carried the toppings just fine. Maybe I would toss in some extra ground beef crumbles or even cooked chicken skin if I wanted more texture. But honestly, the meatza didn't need much. What surprised me the most was the crust. I really expected it to fall apart or be greasy in that slipping off the plate kind of way. But it was solid. The egg did its job, the 1 centimeter thickness was just right, even the areas where I had patched things together, stealing meat from the middle to cover the mozzarella, held up better than I expected. The silicone liner helped too. The meat released cleanly, no sticking, no crust casualties, just 4 thick, greasy, satisfying slices of pure carnivore chaos. So what's the final verdict? Honestly, I am going to make this again. Absolutely. The process was a bit of a mess, between measuring beef with a spoon, slicing a mozzarella ball into weird strips and burning bacon on the first try, but the end result was totally worth it. Let me know if you want me to experiment more with this one and give you the best meatza recipe out there. So, did ChatGPT lie? Well, no. It gave me a meatza, it said it would be good, I questioned everything, made a few detours, possibly overanalyzed a pack of salami, but in the end, it was good. Like really good. Would I trust it again? Probably. But next time I'm asking it for something with less geometry involved. Thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll meet you here next time on Meat Carnivore.